Good morning, good afternoon. I'm Paul Schreier. I'm the research director at ESCoE, and I'd like to welcome you all to today's webinar on the topic of the changing nature of work. What can we learn from time use diaries? Now, we all know that time use information is important for many analytical reasons. Probably the best known application is estimating own account production of services by households, but there is a whole host of other usages that time use information can be put to. And today we will hear about a particularly interesting use of time use data, namely the effects of remote working. And I'm happy to introduce to you our presenter, Francesca Foliano. She's an assistant professor in economics at the University of Southampton. Her research focuses on labor economics and economics of education. Francesca will give her presentation for half an hour, 40 minutes, and will be followed by Professor Alex Bryson, who is Professor of Quantitative Social Sciences at UCL's Social Research Institutes. And after he has given his comments and thoughts, we will open up for a Q&A for everyone via the chat box. We should be able to finish the webinar within about an hour, and I'm very pleased to see such good sign up to the event. So without further ado, I'll turn over to Francesca for her presentation. Francesca, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you so much for the introduction. And thank you very much for having me here today for this seminar. Okay, so what I will present today are some new results from a project that is a joint work with my colleagues, Rebecca Riley at King's College and Lindsay Brown at the Office for National Statistics. In this project, as you already mentioned, we focus on something that was a big change that involved many of us during the pandemic and after the pandemic, which is basically the shift towards remote work. We are going to focus on this topic by trying to understand what are the differences in time use allocation and some well-being measures between individuals who report working from home in time use diaries and individuals who report working away from home. As I mentioned, we use time use data. Time use data, in particular, the ones we use in this project are a novel data set that has been collected by the ONS since April 2020, and the most recent collection was in March 2025. ESCoE in particular has collaborated for the last two waves of this time use survey in March 24 and March 25. And the idea is to kind of extend this collaboration to try to increase the sample, first of all, continue this data collection, then increase the sample of these time use surveys, and also collect information that are useful for economic measurements and more generally for economists. Okay. So, as I mentioned, we study working from home. And what is interesting to understand is whether actually in the UK we experienced a big shift, big compared also to other countries. So here I present the proportion of men and women in work who report working mainly or partly from home from January 2013 up to the end of 2024. This data come from the annual population survey, which is the largest household survey in the UK and reaches around 300,000 respondents a year. So what is interesting to see is that before the pandemic, working from home was reported by a kind of stable proportion of workers. Around 16% men reported working from home between 2013 and February 2020, and around 11% of women were reporting the same. Gender difference driven by occupational segregation between men and women in different occupations, but with women doing occupations that are more difficult to be done from home, such as teachers and nurses. Okay, so what we observe is that in March 2020, with the onset of the pandemic, and then subsequently with the social restriction policies implemented to contain it, we see an increase in the proportion of individuals who report working from home, and we a steady increase between 2020 and the mid of 21, when the third strict lockdown ended, and then after that we kind of see this proportion of individuals reporting working from home kind of stabilizing. And quite interesting to see that this change that happened during the pandemic led to a gender convergence in working from home. Okay, so clearly, one thing I should mention about this figure is that you can see some little triangles that are blue for men and green for women. This is basically the prediction of the proportion of individuals who will be working from home based on all the data between 2013 and February 2020. So if we hadn't had the COVID-19 pandemic, we would have seen a much lower proportion of individuals working from home. So we can consider that the old shock that came with the pandemic, with the policies and the changes in work policies across many workplaces had driven this change that kind of stabilized in mid-2021. Okay. So clearly, remote work is a big thing for the UK, and some cross-country comparison that have been done by Nick Bloom and co-authors have shown that the UK, together with US and Canada and Australia, if I'm not wrong, is among the countries with the most persistent post-pandemic shift towards working from home, and also with the not only most persistent, but the highest proportion of workers reporting working from home. Working from home is very important, and it has implications for employees, for workers, for employers, and policymakers. It's important for employers, it's important for workers because it might affect well-being, work-life balance, and mental health. Very early studies based on pre-pandemic data have shown that working from home has positive effect on well-being, particularly for men and middle-aged workers. However, more recent studies, in particular the one by Emmanuel and co-authors, show that in the post-pandemic time, working from home has had a detrimental effect on well-being, in particular for individuals who are single and living alone. So clearly this negative effect on well-being was driven by loneliness of these individuals, and loneliness during the day, not only after work, but also during work. It's also important for workers because we've seen in many studies that workers are willing to forgo part of their earnings or earning growth in order to work from home. For employers, working from home is important because of productivity, of course. So far, we had mixed signals from the literature about the effect of remote work on productivity. Some studies have found positive effects. Some other studies have found negative effects. The ones I'm mentioning here are mostly experimental studies, quasi-experimental studies. However, they are focused on one specific company, one specific job or sector. This means that these mixed results might be driven by the fact that productivity and working from home is actually very context specific. It might depend on the type of job or on the type of sector. And finally, working from home is important for policymakers because we've seen, the literature has shown that remote working and the shift towards remote working has had a massive effect on cities, and in particular urban structure of cities and the housing market. An example, I think the most prominent example in this literature is the paper by Ramani and Bloom that showed the so-called donut effect. That is, cities kind of hollow out in the center. People and businesses move away from the center of cities to locate in kind of more peripheral residential areas, kind of hollowing out therefore the center and populating more the sides of the cities. So clearly working from home is important. I probably don't need to convince you about that. And therefore it's important to understand why workers continue to work remotely. And we think that time use data can kind of open a window on these patterns and can help us understand the answer for this question. Okay, so what are our research questions? We have mainly 4 research questions. First of all, we ask whether time use diaries can be used to track the prevalence of remote work in the UK over time. So basically, we're asking whether time use surveys can be used as another way of measuring remote work. The reason for this is because at the moment in the UK, we have relatively less data set to track this type of work and changes in patterns of this type of work compared to other countries such as the US. And therefore, we also know that the main data we use is the annual population survey or the LFS that have been subject to the object of criticism for their reliability, and therefore having another additional set of information that allows us to track work from home is important. We also ask whether remote work is associated with different time allocation, multitasking, and daily patterns of activities compared to work from the office. We also we then ask what are the implications for enjoyment, for self-perceived productivity, and more generally for well-being. And finally, this is a kind of smaller question. We try to understand whether there are gender differences in time allocation, multitasking, and daily patterns, but also enjoyment. Okay, so just a very quick summary of this paper. As I mentioned, we use this new time use diary data collected by the ONS from April 2020 and March 2025. In particular, in this paper, we will mostly focus on the post-pandemic period, that is November 22 to March 2025. In most of the results, I will show you that's the sample we will use. We compare time use patterns on weekdays. So in this study, we focus on weekdays worked from home with those worked away from home. So basically, this is a between-person design. And the reason is because for each wave of this time use survey, we observe only 1 weekday diary for each worker. So either we observe the worker in the office, or we observe the worker at home. We then examine how individuals allocate time across various activities when we're working from home compared to working from the workplace, and also their enjoyment and their self-perceived productivity. We think we bring 4 main contributions with this analysis that, as I already mentioned, by saying that is a between-person design, it's purely descriptive. However, we think it's novel, at least for the UK, and also is interesting because it's kind of based on very recent data. So we think, first of all, that we show that time use data can be used to track remote work patterns and trends, while also capturing other aspects of individuals' lives and behaviors. And this contributes to the literature on measuring remote work. In particular, the papers in this literature, the most important papers are the ones by Barrero co-authors and Bachman and co-authors. We then we bring new evidence about the UK that interestingly supports some early findings based mostly on US data that remote work increased leisure, unpaid work, and multitasking, but challenges other claims that have found, in particular, they found higher well-being. What I'm basically saying is that by looking at this new data, more recent data, we kind of confirm some patterns we observed during the pandemic, but also we challenge other results found during the pandemic. We find in terms of gender that both men and women spend more time in unpaid work and unpaid care when they work from home. So what we observe is not a narrowing of the gap, the gender gap in time allocation within, well, rather than within the household, the time allocation to unpaid work, sorry. And this is important because it contributes to a literature that has been studying gender differences in time allocation during the pandemic, and particularly during the social restrictions, but also literature that looks at the increase in time spent by men at home in unpaid work and changes in social norms. So we think that possibly over time we might observe a change in social norms, given the fact that men, the ones that work from home, seem to spend more time doing unpaid work. Finally, we conclude from the totality, the sum of our results, that avoidance of commuting and daily time reallocation are important in explaining working from home preferences. Again, this is a result that has been found for other countries and is important to bring some new results also for the UK and for a more recent period of time. Okay, so a little description of the data we use here. So we use this ONS online time use survey called OTUS data. So far, there have been 9 waves collected between April 2020 and March 2025, and the respondents are drawn from the NatSem panel. These, as the name suggests, these surveys collected online. And in so far, we can observe 7,500, around 7,500 weekday diaries of employed adults that report at least 4 hours of work during their weekday. When we focus only on the post-pandemic period, this sample reduces to 4,400 diaries. Okay, so what are these time use surveys or these diaries that we collect from individuals? So each respondent is randomly allocated 2 days for which they have to report their activities over 24 hours, 1 weekday and 1 weekend day. So during these 24 hours, respondents are asked to report all the activities they've done between 3 a.m. and 2:59 a.m. of the following day. They are given a choice of over 100 activities to choose from when they decide which activity to allocate to each time slot. And together with primary activities, that is the main activity that they are doing over 24 hours, respondents are also asked about their secondary activities, that is whether there is something else they're doing while doing their main activity. Also, respondents are asked about the instantaneous enjoyment of their activities for all episodes they report in their daily diary. This means that every time they allocate an activity to a certain time slot, they are asked, there is a window that prompts after their choice, asking whether they have enjoyed this activity, how much they enjoyed this activity between 1 and 7. Also, only for paid work, individuals are asked to report their self-perceived productivity on a scale between 1 and 5. This question has been added by us in March 2024 and has been collected only for the last couple of waves. Finally, this survey also collects a very comprehensive set of socioeconomic characteristics that allow to understand who these individuals, who these workers who respond to these diaries are. We know that there is a certain proportion of individuals or respondents who respond to more than one wave, respond in more than one wave. However, we don't exploit yet this longitudinal dimension. For the moment, we are treating each wave as a repeated cross-section. one important thing is to describe how respondents define their working from home. So when they have to choose what activity to allocate to a certain time slot, they're asked in particular whether they are working or working from home. So they have to specifically explain which activity, whether just working or specifically working from home. Finally, we think that the continuous time use diaries are important data, interesting data, because they minimize recall bias and are less influenced by social desirability bias compared to direct survey questions. Okay, so here I'm just giving you an example of a screenshot of the screen that is presented to the respondents once they choose in particular an episode, an activity of paid work. So probably you can probably see in the background here that this particular respondent has chosen the time slot between 8 and 4. And basically what this individual has chosen is paid work. And the reason we know that is because once the activity has been chosen, actually in particular this individual has chosen working from home, this pop-up appears where the individual is then asked how much he enjoyed these activities between 1 and 7, and then during this time, roughly how productive were you? And these are the answers given, the choices for the respondent. 100% productive, 90 to 99% productive, 80 to 89% productive, 70 to 79, 70 to 79%, and less than 70% productive. Okay, and as I mentioned already, this question about self-perceived productivity is asked only for episodes of paid work. Therefore, when the respondent reports working from home or working. Okay, so let's look at the first set of results. So first of all, we want to understand whether time use diaries can be used to measure working from home and track patterns and trends in working from home over time. So here I report the proportion of diaries, the proportion of weekday diaries that report work from home according to 3 different definitions that I will say in a second, in a moment. But I do that for the 9 Otus waves, but I compare these 9 Otus waves that were collected from April 2020 to March 2025 to a previous time use survey, the UK time use survey that was collected in 2014, and is the most recent nationally representative time use survey that we find in the pre-pandemic period. So the proportion of diaries reporting working from home for these previous survey are here. Okay, so the 3 definitions of working from home that I consider here are anytime reported working from home, so proportion of diaries that report anytime working from home, proportion of diaries that report at least 4 hours, and proportion of time that reports the whole time in paid work working from home. Okay, so if we focus mostly on the second and third panel, which are the closest definition of working from home, we observe in other surveys and in other studies, what we see is that the proportion of diaries reporting working from home was just below 10% and around 6%, below 10% for men and around 6% for women in 2014-15, and then there is of course a big increase during the pandemic, and in particular in the 2 strict lockdown in April 2020 and March 2021, where the proportion of diaries reaches around 40%. And then we see a slight decline in the proportion of diaries reporting working from home until November 2022, when the proportion kind of stabilizes. It looks like we almost reached a sort of equilibrium in terms of individuals working from home and therefore reporting working from home. If anything, in the most recent survey, we observed an increase in respondents reporting working from home 4 or more hours or the whole time in paid work. Okay, so what is interesting is that these numbers, although they mean something slightly different, these are proportional week diaries where respondents report working from home, are very similar to the numbers we observed in the APS. So in a sense, they validate each other. These two surveys that come from very different samples validate each other and show a similar pattern. So I think the conclusion is that the time-use diaries are very important for many reasons that go beyond remote work, but can be used to actually measure remote work effectively and track the changes in patterns of behavior of workers. Okay. So, as I said at the very beginning, what we are interested in is understanding whether there are differences in time allocation between respondents who report working from home and respondents who report working away from home. So in order to do that, we estimate some regressions, one for each type of activity. Here you can see the list of the activities that we consider and are exhaustive of the 24 hours, sleeping, personal care, travel, unpaid work, unpaid care, watching TV. We consider it separately because it's a big category. Leisure, well-being, linked leisure, fitness, social media, internet, and paid work. So for each of these category of activities, we run a regression where we have on the left-hand side the total number of minutes in the diary in that specific activity. And on the right-hand side, we have a dummy for working from home, whether in particular the individual, the respondent has reported at least 4 hours working from home. Then we have this dummy, a gender dummy, an interaction between the two, and then a comprehensive set of individual characteristics, regional dummies and occupation dummies that kind of try to control for the heterogeneity between these two groups. And so the estimates that I report here are the coefficients from the OLS regressions that I expressed as percentage differences relative to the baseline category. So the baseline category in this case is the mean time of minutes spent in each category of in each type of activity by the workers who work away from home. So the way this table works, I'm explaining it because it's very dense and probably need to explain it as much as I can. So first of all, for both men and women, I report first the baseline, which is the mean number of minutes spent in each category by workers who report working away from home. And then I report a column, which is working from home percentage, which are the percentage, the differences in time allocation in that specific categories expressed as percentage of the baseline. So what we observe, and then I would like to say, I should specify, just in case it's not clear, that the coefficients from the OLS regression used here are the coefficient for the working from home dummy for men, and then the sum of these dummy plus the interaction between the dummy and the gender indicator for women. Okay, so what this table is saying to us is that individuals who report working from home tend to work more, tend to sleep more, around 7.5% more for men and 4% more for women. Women who work from home, who report working from home, spend around 10% less time compared to the baseline, which is women working from the office in personal care. So they spend less time in personal care. What is very striking about this table is that respondents report around 76, 77 for men percent and 71% for women less time in transports. This is around 65 minutes for men and 55 minutes less for women. And I mean, this is striking because, of course, it's driven by the fact that these individuals don't commute, but is a big component of their total day, the total diary. We observed that the respondents working from home spend more time in unpaid work. This is true both for men and women, around 38% more for men and 24-25% more for women. More time in unpaid care, around 46% for men and 45% for women. Also, women seem to spend around 10% more watching television or watching programs on different devices. Finally, we don't observe a difference in general leisure, but we observe that individuals who work from home tend to spend almost twice as much time as their counterpart in the office in fitness and well-being related type of leisure. So this is the big difference. And finally, what we see, but it's quite small, is that men who work from home seem to work around 5% less compared to compared to the baseline, that is workers who work from the office. This is around 20 minutes, so it's not a big number compared to the total number of minutes spent in work during the day. Okay, so clearly what we have observed here is that individuals who work from home spend much less time in transports and seem to reallocate, and also in case of women, less time in personal care, and they kind of they seem to reallocate this time across other activities. And this is true for the day we observe, that is the day in which we observe these respondents working from home. Okay, so I mentioned before that in these time use diaries, we collect also secondary activities. Here I do the same, we run the same regressions for slightly more aggregated categories of activities for secondary activities while the main activity is being in work. So we want to see whether individuals who report working from home are doing more multitasking while they are working from home compared to individuals who work from the office. And what we observe is kind of, yes, individuals who work from home report more than twice the time in secondary activity, in particular leisure. And in the case of women, they also report a few more minutes, which is more than twice, but we're still speaking about a very small number of minutes in unpaid work and unpaid care. So we do observe some multitasking done by individuals who work from home. What about allocation of work across different over the day? So we might expect that workers who work from home, they're more flexible in the way they allocate their time during their working day. So we've seen that, yes, men work around 20% less compared to individuals who work from the office, but there are no big differences in terms of work and working time. So what is interesting to understand is whether they still work, but they work in slightly different times of the day. So here I report the estimated probability of being in work, paid work, across 24 hours for individuals who work from home, individuals who work away from home, and also the blue band that the blue shaded area that you can see at the bottom is the difference between these two the estimated probability for these two groups. So what we observe, I don't have much time, so I can't go into the details of this estimation, but this is detailed in the paper if you're interested. But I think what is interesting about this is observing that individuals who work from home seem to work to start their work later, so they're less likely to work very early in the morning. Around here is around in between 6 and 8, so they're less likely to work very early in the morning. This is true for women, but it's particularly true for men. They are more likely to be working slightly later in the day, and again, less likely to work during lunchtime compared to their counterpart in the office. And they are more likely to work later in the afternoon. And these patterns are similar for men and women. If anything, they look more striking for men. So, okay, they reallocate their time, they save time on commuting, reallocate across different activities, but they seem also to spread their working time slightly different compared to workers who work from home. Okay, so these, of course, hints at the flexibility that comes with remote working, and definitely is a benefit for workers to be able to do so. So what we want to understand now is the enjoyment of working from home, whether individuals actually enjoy working from home compared to other activities, how much they enjoy working from home compared to other activities. So what we do here, I report some results from a regression where we have gender-specific regression. So we estimated these regressions for men and women separately. And in this regression, I estimate, I have on the left-hand side the instantaneous enjoyment reported for each episode for each diary. And then on the right-hand side, I have dummies for different categories of activities, where the baseline here in the categories of activities, I split working away from home from working from home. They're considered two different categories of activities, and the baseline here is sleeping and personal care that are unavoidable activities for all respondents. Okay, so basically what we see here is the differences in enjoyment with respect to sleeping and personal care for all the activities listed in the diaries. And what we can see here is that individuals who work away from home enjoy working less than sleeping and personal care. However, these negative this result is more negative for individuals who work from home. So individuals who work from home seem to particularly enjoy less working, their paid work, their time in paid work. What we can take out from these estimation is also that all individuals, all respondents, particularly dislike working from home. Particularly dislike traveling. So all individuals dislike traveling. And this is interesting because on the one hand, we have individuals who work away from home who probably like working a bit more than individuals who work from home, but at the same time, they have to face a much longer traveling, which is particularly disliked. Okay, so no good news in terms of enjoyment, instantaneous enjoyment. What about self-perceived productivity? So here I report some results to try to gather the differences in self-perceived productivity between workers who work from home and workers who work from the office. I'm not going to go into the details because I don't have much time, but what I'm going to focus on in terms of the main result is these marginal effects from a probit, where on the left-hand side, we have a dichotomous variable equal 1 if respondents report the highest level of productivity and 0 otherwise. And what we can observe is that both men and women report around 5 percentage points less they're 5 percentage points less likely to report the highest level of productivity or self-perceived productivity compared to the baseline, that is individuals who work from home, that are respectively 22 and 25%. Just one very quick figure about a comment that I receive a lot about these results. A comment that I received is, okay, people seem to enjoy working from home less. They say they are less productive, or they feel they're less productive. It's probably because individuals, respondents, do very different things when they are at home compared to when they are in the office. This is probably true. We all know that we probably do different things when we work from home compared to when we work from the office. However, it's something we cannot test with the data, the main data for which I showed to you results before. So what I can instead show you is some novel results from a new time use survey collected again by the ONS among public sector workers. In this novel time use survey, workers are asked to report at least a couple of days, diaries for at least a couple of days of work. And they have to report their activities over 24 hours, but they have particularly to focus on the time they spend in paid work, listing the time spent in different tasks. Very basically, what I show you here is the average time reported between individuals who work from the workplace and individuals who work from home in tasks that are non-sector, non-occupation specific. And what we can see is that individuals who work from home report much more time in tasks that we can define more kind of admin type of task, more time in reports, data process, records, paperwork, emails, and so on. So probably there is a component of truth. It is possible that individuals report lower enjoyment, partly because they do different things when they're at home and they do mostly admin, so they don't feel particularly productive. This is a possibility, is one way to read their lower enjoyment, but also their lower, less perceived productivity. Okay, so I think I don't have time anymore. Just a very quick line to say that we look at differences in more general level, more general measures of well-being that are used in the literature, such as life satisfaction, happiness, anxiousness, and worthiness. And these are all questions that are collected in the questionnaire that is given to the respondents to the time use surveys. We don't see any patterns, so we don't see any pattern differences in general measures of well-being between individuals who work from home, individuals who work from the office. So all in all, I think we can conclude, and after this I'm finished, that remote work persistence is probably driven by time savings and flexibility, not enjoyment or productivity. Well-being benefits arise outside of work time and possibly compensate for the less enjoyment during the work time. And when mental health impact might hinge on how workers balance flexibility versus enjoyment of their time or perception of their productivity. Future research is very important, since I hope there is someone from the ONS in the audience. We need to collect larger multi-day diaries, and in particular, we need to keep on collecting task level data to better understand how people work from home and what they do when they are working from home. Okay, I'll leave this. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much, Francesca, for a very clear and rich presentation. And let me turn to Alex right away for some thoughts and comments on the topic. Alex, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Paul. Can you see my slides?
Yes.
Great. Okay, I've only got 2 slides. Thanks for that great presentation, Francesca. Slide 1 relates to motivation and contribution. And the second is my thoughts on the paper and some other things that you might want to do.
Alex, sorry, can you put your slides in presentation mode? So
see if this works. Does
that work? Here we are. Yes.
Great. Okay. Excellent. So obviously working from home is a massive big change in the nature of work, and it's here to stay. We know this from Nick Bloom and colleagues, as Francesca identified, and it's clearly got big implications for the productivity of workers, the operation of labour markets and well-being. But crucially, these implications, at least some of them, are theoretically ambiguous. So it's very, very important to bear down with empirical research. Some of that was reviewed by Francesca, and here's a bit more of that review. There are some clear findings from that literature. Changing incidence in working from home in the UK, in particular, a massive big spike as COVID broke out, then some decline, but remaining much higher than in the pre-pandemic world. We also know that in the English-speaking world, it's somewhat higher now than it is in other parts of the world. There's an important distinction, however, between working from home fully and hybrid working and working solely in the workplace. I'll come back to that because I think Francesca has data on hybrid working, I think, but you can see with the way the data is constructed and how they've designed this particular paper that doesn't get much of a look in. And we know that workers are willing to pay for working from home, but differentially, there's heterogeneous preferences for working from home. But there's a lot of uncertainty in the empirical literature about the association between working from home and worker well-being and worker productivity. And there's new people adding to this empirical evidence on a daily basis. So Xiaowei Zhu's just been doing some work using the UK HLS, finding a positive association between working from home and work-related well-being, especially job satisfaction. So a slightly different dimension of well-being than the one Francesca's been looking at today. Bożena Wilgoszewska and colleagues using the birth cohorts identified in particular the deleterious effect of hybrid working in exacerbating a gender gap in worker well-being. But there are, of course, difficulties in isolating working from home from other things that happened during the COVID period, illness, lockdown, key worker status, and so on, which is why it's nice to see one or two experimental pieces of work. Nick Bloom was quick off the mark pre-COVID, doing a very nice single firm study on the randomization of working from home in China, finding positive effects on both productivity and worker well-being, but then did another one more recently in the COVID era, showing again improved job satisfaction for workers in that particular firm and no significant effect on worker performance. So you can see there's a lot of contestation about empirically what people are finding. The contribution of this paper then is we have the opportunity to see a detailed decomposition of time allocation of those working from home, essentially revealed preferences. We see well-being for each event, and we have some nice pre-pandemic data, which Francesca, for obvious reasons, didn't want to focus on too much today, but they're in the paper, and quite a nice long period of post-pandemic data. Many of the studies to date look very early on after the advent of COVID. So my thoughts, and these thoughts really relate to the paper which I've read rather than the presentation today. Because there's so much theoretical ambiguity about the potential implications of working from home, and because, as Francesca has readily accepted, the findings are descriptive, it's really, really important, I think, to spend more time in the paper discussing those theoretical ambiguity so the reader can get a handle on how to interpret the descriptive findings. And here, of course, crucially is the issue which Francesca referred to of selection into working from home in the first place. That's going to be conditional to some degree on technological constraints, which can be binding in some instances. But if they're not binding, then there are choices to be made, and choices are made by both employers and workers. And so bargaining power is going to come into play. I wanted to know something about that in order to try and interpret what we're seeing in the data. Secondly, there's heterogeneity in the amenity attached to working from home across worker types. That value may vary according to circumstances, only some of which might be observed in the data, things like housing composition, household composition, housing quality, and distance from home. Of course, if the market was frictionless, workers would pay for that amenity such that the overall value of the job and then possibly well-being effects might be cancelled out or remain constant relative to the counterfactual. And perhaps that's what Francesca is indeed finding in some of her other well-being metrics. Nevertheless, the descriptive findings are extremely interesting because we see that compared to those working on employer premises, those working from home commute less. At least in the case of men, they're working shorter hours per day, they're doing more multitasking, they have more leisure and more sleep, and yet they're no more satisfied. So what's going on? Could it be that those working from home, even though they're spending less time in work and commuting, but maybe they are constrained in using the additional leeway they have to vie towards more enjoyable tasks, which you'd think, other things equal, that's what they do. But maybe it differs across different types of people. In particular, you can imagine people with care responsibilities at home having to spend much more time on caring, which might not be instantaneously enjoyable. The alternative is that working from home actually degrades the well-being returns to any given non-work activity. And that wasn't really clear for me from table 3 of the paper that they produced. I refer them to a really nice paper by people in Germany looking at German time use data, looking at the unemployed versus those in employment, which shows that instantaneous employment across the day is not that dissimilar across workers and the unemployed there, because the unemployed do indeed vie towards tasks that are more enjoyable. So I wanted to get some greater understanding of that. Then finally, a few words of caution. Francesca focused on the 0-1 indicator working from home today, but there's clearly potential value in unpacking hybrid working across the week, since this is shown to be very different for well-being compared to working from home all the time in other studies. Secondly, the paper often refers to the reallocation of time when working from home versus not, but that's not what we're really seeing here. We don't have panel data where we see individuals switching over time, nor do we have randomization. So these comparisons sort of invoke a counterfactual that's not really there. My suggestion would be to try and refine the analysis by doing some matching on the propensity to work from home. Why? Well, because many of the not working for home people are not going to be good counterfactuals for the working from home people, because they essentially do jobs which are never going to be working from home jobs. Finally, well, preferences versus constraints. I do think, although occupation appears in some of the regressions, I do think I'd like to see a lot more about trying to understand who works from home, the role of occupation, perhaps how this has changed over time. Francesca showed finally a nice table looking at different well-being metrics. It's important for people who aren't used to looking at well-being data that instantaneous or experienced enjoyment in the moment is just one component of well-being. Think of eudaimonic components and hedonic components and so on. And it's really, really important to understand the differences between them. Where we do find differences, as Francesca does, as she put up that last slide, one of those last slides there, it's really, really informative to understand how they change and why. Finally, self-assessed productivity. I've seen this now in a couple of studies. I think Golo's on the line and he's got it for the skills and employment survey, but quite difficult to interpret those productivity differences, especially when it's between people. Of course, it's much more interesting if it's within person, but I did want the paper to tell the reader a little bit more about the provenance of this sort of question and empirical experiences in using such metrics. So thank you. I'll leave it there.
Well, thank you very much, Alex. Francesca, any reactions to Alex's comments and thoughts?
Thank you very much, Alex. This is a very comprehensive review of the paper. And yes, I agree with most of your comments. Thank you very much. I will implement some of the things you mentioned. You're right, I should produce some matching, some estimates from matched samples. So, you know, it's in a sense, economists don't like matching, so it's almost as same as not doing it, but I will do it just to understand some of the mechanism behind these results. Just one thing about the self-assessed productivity. I think I have only 1 minute to speak, so I'm going to be very brief. This measure, I thank you for the comment. I will explain more in the paper what's the origin of this measure. This measure was defined by Cabinet Office based on some focus groups with civil servants. So it's really a question that is particularly tailored for public sector workers and civil servants, but it seemed particularly effective. So we decided to use it in the survey. The point is not really trying to understand whether individuals are productive or not. It's more trying to work out their feeling about the time they spend in paid work at home versus from the office. So it was more trying to gather more information about their preferences in their time spent from work. And we know that self-assessed measures of productivity will never be good enough compared to more objective measures such as the quantity of output produced and so on. So that's the way we personally interpret this question and the result from this question. Okay, thank you very much. And all your comments are great, and I'll implement. Thank you.
Thank you, Francesca. We have a few more minutes before the end of our webinar. I don't see any comments in the meeting chat, so let me just ask you. Well, ESCoE is a measurement outfit, so I was just wondering whether you could outline some of the wishes that you would have for future time use surveys being conducted. I mean, are there particular elements that you felt were crucially missing from the time use survey, which would have been very useful in your analysis? Or what is, if you mentioned briefly that this was something you would like to see, but maybe you could elaborate a little bit on this. You're muted, Francesca.
Thank you very much for the question. Unfortunately, I couldn't write my letter to Santa Claus in time for this survey, but yes, so personally I think work is very important. Understanding the way we work is important, so we should design time use survey in a way that focus more on the time we spend in paid work. And we should collect information about sectors. We should have multiple diaries during the working days in order to understand, how people might either, do some sort of hybrid working where they work from home and then also from the office, and compare their behavior in the 2 days reported. It would be interesting to have more attention to the tasks the individuals spend time when they are at work. So rather than having many, like dozens of activities for time spent outside of work, some sort of focus on time spent in work. Also some experiments done with time use survey to try to understand preferences of individuals. So these are all in my wish list for the next data collection. So hopefully we will have the funds to be able to do this. But yes, thank you. Thanks for the question.
Thank you, Francesca. It's good that we can look ahead and exploit the richness of time use data for these purposes, but also for other questions that are certainly around. I see now there's a couple of comments or questions. Let me just have a look. I think, well, Erica made a comment, I think, and then Nazaria had a question of whether you tried differentiating among different types of work from home activities. Maybe you can quickly respond to that question.
Yes. Different type of work from home activities. So we don't have, thanks for the question. Sorry, I was just reading it. So thanks for the question. This is great. For the main paper that I presented today, we don't have information about tasks. So we cannot do that. We are starting to work on this new paper. I don't think I can look at synchronous versus asynchronous tasks. I have to look at the list of tasks that are, I mean, meetings is one. I'll look better at what can be done, but this is a great suggestion, and it's something I started to see in the literature. I saw that Nick Bloom is working on these, so it's a great comment, and I can definitely try. Sorry, I lost one headphone. I can definitely try to do that. Thank you for the suggestion.
And finally, there's a remark by Philippe, who asks whether you could separate different populations in your data, those that are actually teleworkers and those that are teleworkers are workers from home, but they are not classified as teleworkers. I don't know if you have
Yes.
enough information on that. Yeah.
So no, we can't fully distinguish between fully remote workers and hybrid workers. That is, workers who work just 1 day or 2 days a week from home. So in terms of the wish list that we were discussing before, one thing that would be very interesting is also collecting the working schedule of respondents, understanding. We've been doing that for the last couple of waves, but not for the all waves. So we need to improve in that sense, trying to understand if we observe the respondent only 1 day in the week and 1 day in the weekend, we need to understand how they organize their week for the rest of the day, which days they work, and also which days they work from home, if they work from home.
Finally, Christoph
Yes.
asks whether there is a distinction, or what is the distinction between video calls and meetings, if there is one, for working from.
It is a very good question. It was they were treated as separate activities. So of course, if you are in the office, you take a meeting and you are in a room with other people. If you are from home, it's probably a video call. It was just to basically show the differences between individuals who work from home, individuals who work from the office. So in that case, for individuals who work from home, definitely meetings will be video call. Yes. Thank you. It's a good point, but it was just to show the difference for all of the kind of more admin activities that are non-occupation specific presented in the survey.
Very good. I think this brings us towards the end of the webinar. I would like to thank you again, Francesca, for and your co-authors for preparing this work, and you for presenting it. I'd like to thank Alex for his thoughts and comments, which I think will further improve your own work going forward. And I would like to thank all the participants who showed their interest both by coming into the meeting, but also by actively asking questions and commenting on the presentations. So thank you very much, everyone, and have an excellent rest of the day. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much. Thank you.